Hello, everyone. I am Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and I'm really excited about today's guest. Once again, we are having a little bit of weather technical difficulties. Thank you, California, for not being used to the rain. But here's where we are. We have an amazing guest today, Dr. Pete Goldman. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. He is an amazing guest. He offers so much value. In fact, one of my other hosts on the network introduced me to him. So you guys know he's already been vetted. He is amazing. Let's just bring him onto the stage now. Welcome.
Hey, Julianne.
So glad to have you here today. I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and how you ended up doing what you do.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and I did not have aspirations to be a healer or a doctor. It did not even occur to me I had other aspirations. I did have a unique experience in that my family was very naturally oriented, meaning on a physical level, at least, we didn't really go to MDs for anything. So that's a start. My mom somehow got interested in other types of healing. And when we went to the doctor, it was like we would go to like the homeopath or the naturopath or the chiropractor, so I didn't grow up in a medical environment at all. My mom was like, buying organic food for the house before it was like popular. So I kind of grew up in that environment. Again, I didn't think I would pursue anything about natural health, but that was my childhood experience. In fact, I remember when my sister and I were little, if we had like a cold or something minor, my mom would do reflexology on us. Like that's how she took care of us, with like reflexology. So like kind of grew up with that mindset. With that said, I was, had other ideas, whether it was athletic ideas or academic ideas that did not involve healing. However, I did have a chiropractor who I went to growing up who had a big influence on me. I didn't really even know what chiropractic was, quite frankly. And quite frankly, what he did was so different than what 99% of other chiropractors do or did. When I was exposed to what he did, I just thought that's what everyone did because I had not seen what was out there in the chiropractic world. So as a kid, he just represented to me what a chiropractor was because I didn't know there was different kinds or whatever. But what I saw when I would go to his waiting room, when I would go to get adjusted, is that people were coming to him for like their thyroid or their liver or their kidney or their, pancreas. I mean, I wasn't going for that. I was a healthy kid, just who was playing sports and was a little banged up or whatever. So that's basically why I was going to him over the years. But nonetheless, I did notice in the waiting room other people talking about all these things, and I was thinking, man, is he just like pushing on people's back and like fixing their pancreas? But again, I was a kid, so I couldn't really put two and two together, and I don't even know if I cared, quite frankly, but it crossed my mind. And then when I got older, I was like a teenager and things like that, and I would go to him and I'd ask him, like, are you doing to them what you do to me? Like crack my back? I mean, like, you're fixing people's like livers? Like, you mean people who like have a liver problem and their medical doctor can't fix it? And like they tried acupuncture and that didn't fix it. And they tried herbs and that didn't fix it. They tried homeopathy and they didn't fix it. And they come to you and you like pushing their back and their liver heals. Like, how is that could be? And he's like, yeah, that's what I do. But even then, I mean, not that I disbelieved him. I did believe him, but I was only, I was a teenager. I was only so interested. So that
Exactly.
was the conversation. That's about as much as I could take. But I always knew him, like, man, I go to this great healer. I mean, I didn't really need him for anything except basic, you kind of straightened me out when I was banged up from rougher sports. But I was like, man, I go to this great healer. This guy can fix anything. I kind of knew that. And then when I was in college, I think I was a freshman in college. I think it was like the last day of college. It was like went to college in Boston. And I was in, I think it was like the last day of school. I was about to go home to New York City and I was messing around with my roommate, my friend, and we were just like, like college kids do, or like wrestling in the hallway, but there was like, cement walls, and he kind of got me in like a bit of a headlock, and he like banged my head into the wall, not on purpose. He felt bad, but I felt like something really went off. And I'm I am, and I've been a very healthy person my whole life. And all of a sudden when I got home, I was like, I just didn't feel well. I was having like headaches and all, which I've never before or since had a headache in my life. But that week I was having these terrible headaches and I was like really ill. And I went to an MD, which I like never went to. Like I said, I didn't grow up with MDs, but we went to like some so-called holistic MD who was pretty famous in Manhattan. He didn't know what to do. And then I think we went to a naturopath and they didn't know what to do. And then I was like, I'll just go to my chiropractor. And he did something and I was like all better. And I've been perfect ever since. And I was like 18 years old then. So I knew this guy was like a grandmaster. I knew that. It was just obvious to me. But I was an economics major in college and I worked on Wall Street in the summers. And I was not thinking about that. But anyway, then I graduated college. I went back from Boston to New York City. I worked in the business world. And then I would think like, man, I should be like a chiropractor. It would just kind of like come in my head, like I should be a chiropractor. But I was like, I was never good at science. And I think I didn't know anything. I was like, I think these guys have to do science. I didn't really know what was going on. I was like, I never liked science in high school. And I don't think I'm going to do that. So I actually asked him, I said to him, and he graduated chiropractic school in the 1950s.
Oh, wow.
So, this guy was practicing for like 40 years by then. So I said to him, do you have any of your textbooks from chiropractic school? I said to him, and he's like, yeah, I'll lend you one. So I was like maybe 23 or 24. And I read the book, and it was, one of these old chiropractic books that was written like in the 1930s. I liked it, and I gave it back to him, and he's like, you should be a chiropractor. He told me that. Then I decided to do it. So I go to chiropractic school, kind of fast forwarding a little bit. I go to chiropractic school after working in New York City for 4 years after graduating college with an economics degree. Go to chiropractic school. And I was also I was doing a lot of martial arts. I was fighting at a world-class level and a very rough kind of fighting. I was doing that around the world. But anyway, so then I go to chiropractic school. And I got there. I'm like, what's going on here? Because I only knew what my chiropractor did. I thought everyone did that. But I soon found out that wasn't true. So what I found interesting when I was in chiropractic school, I got there in 1993. I graduated college in 1989. And then like I said, I worked for 4 years. So when I got to chiropractic school, I found a very interesting phenomena, which was this. I found that when they would talk to us, like in what they called like assembly, where they would like, everyone would sit, in the bleachers and the kind of like the gym or whatever it was, and they talked to us kind of about chiropractic philosophy. And I saw they were like, oh yeah, chiropractic, you can fix anything. If you align the spine and open the nerves, like chiropractic can fix anything. They were talking in very big terms. But I really found they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't really have the confidence to do any of that stuff, and nor could any of them do it. So they said they could do it, but they couldn't do it. I saw they couldn't do it, and I saw they weren't really confident. When a real live human who was sick came in, then all their eloquent speeches went out the window. So I called my chiropractor, and I'm like, I don't know I was in Atlanta. That's where the school was. And I called him back in Brooklyn. I'm like, I don't know what's going on at this school, but, it's not what I thought it was. And he was like, just don't make any trouble. Just go through the 4 years. Just get your degree. Like, don't worry about that. He's like, he said, you're not going to learn about healing there, but I'll teach you. So he told me that. So I would go see him on my vacations. I would call him all the time. And there was another chiropractor. This is kind of a cool story, by the way, kind of segueing a bit. But there was another chiropractor who he referred me to in the Atlanta area who knew what he knew. It's kind of a separate path or sect, of chiropractic, you might say. And this guy who he referred me to in Atlanta was practicing for 40 years too. And he was another grandmaster. He had no affiliation with the school that I was at. So every week I would go to his house, and he was an elderly man at the time. He would just teach me. Like, so I would just go and he would just like teach me one-on-one, like on the week, on the weekends.
Wow.
And it was interesting because here I was going to the largest chiropractic school in the world, which it was. I think it still is. I'm not saying it's the best. It may be the worst. I don't know. But it is the largest chiropractic school in the world, for whatever that's worth. Probably nothing. Anyway, so I noticed that this old man, I would call him an old man, the guy who was teaching me on the weekends, he got better results than all my teachers, like everyone at the school, the whole faculty, the whole staff, all the teachers who were the ones saying all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But he could do stuff like my guy in Brooklyn could do. Of course, they learned from the same guy I would later kind of put together. So here I was a student, but I knew what I knew from learning from this guy. And I had half of the faculty, the staff of my school getting adjusted by me. I was only a student. And they're all coming to me. I do this, which is not taught in the school. So the common denominator was a guy named Dr. Thurman Fleet. I don't know if you can see the picture, but he's there.
Up there.
Probably kind of small from where you're sitting. But anyway, so Dr. Thurman Fleet was the one who was the teacher of my guy in Brooklyn and the guy in Atlanta area. And Dr. Thurman Fleet was a chiropractor who practiced in San Antonio, Texas in the 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. And this guy was like a modern day Jesus. I don't mean in a religious context. I mean in a healing context. He was like a miracle worker. Yeah. People would come to him and people, I mean, you name it, you name a disease or condition, like he fixed it on people when nothing else they did had worked, whether they tried other chiropractors or you name it, mainstream medicine, non-mainstream, energy workers, spiritual healers, whatever. So Dr. Thurman Fleet invented something called zone therapy, which is a kind of a technique of chiropractic with a very large philosophy of healing behind it. And again, as you know, techniques of healing are a dime a dozen and philosophies are a dime a dozen, but results are results. So these results spoke for themselves and they were unparalleled, quite frankly, certainly within chiropractic and without chiropractic too. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I was taught Dr. Fleet's zone therapy and his other ideas of healing by my mentor in Brooklyn and the guy that I was seeing on the weekends in the Atlanta area. I was, for several years, I was doing it basically the way I had been taught. Like I was doing what you might call zone therapy, which is what Dr. Fleet had invented. And then I'd say it was about 2002, might have been a little before, but certainly by 2002, I altered what I had been taught a bit, just a bit, and I named it zone technique. And if you look at Dr. Fleet's teachings on zone therapy and you look at my teachings on zone technique, you can see the differences. There are several differences. And part of the reason is because I had many other influences in healing and metaphysics besides Dr. Fleet. Listen, I love Dr. Fleet. His picture's right there. He's the greatest. Nonetheless, I had many other influences along the way in healing and metaphysics. And then I ultimately created zone technique. So that's the first part of the story for you.
Well, let me just say something really quick. It's kind of like the CD to the cassette. They both play music. It's just with more information, you can do more things. So I just wanted to point that out too, that it's definitely not a slight in any way by improving upon and adding your influences to what you were taught, because that's really what life is about anyway. But anyway, please go ahead.
So great point. And so with that said, so I created zone technique and then, I practiced for several years, starting in essentially the mid 90s. And something happened in around 2017, and I'll tell you what that was. I woke up one morning and I remember thinking I had developed quite I'm not even sure what you call it, empire. I developed quite an empire by then. And what I mean by that is that by 2017, I had already had patients fly into me from 30 different cities and countries around the world.
Wow.
Meaning people had come to me from New York, Chicago, Guam, Hawaii, UK, Holland, Japan, South Korea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and cities and countries all around the world who were sick. Some with most with non-musculoskeletal conditions, like I mentioned some of them before, and some with, severe disc problems in their neck or back or whatever. And these people had tried chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy, spiritual healing, Reiki, and they were still, or medicine, they were still sick. And they flew in to see me and were healing. So I already had that, created that world. And also another thing that I found when I was thinking on that day in 2017 is most chiropractors or most doctors or most healers, if you think about where their patient base lives, if you're an acupuncturist or a chiropractor or whatever you are, probably your patient base lives in about a 45-minute radius of your office. Probably, you might have like one or two patients who love you and they drive 2 hours, but people probably live about 45 minutes away or less. But by that time in 2017, I already had over 100 patients driving 4 hours each way to see me for a few minutes, for just a few minutes with me. So I said to myself, okay, we have people flying in from 30 different cities and countries around the world. We have people driving, it's 8 hours of driving for a few minutes with me in a day, over 100. We have people coming and healing from things that they have tried and failed everywhere else. So I said, I might as well just teach everyone to do this. And it's funny, the thing that really pushed me over the border to do it, you might find this an interesting story. I had a bunch of people from Malaysia, and these guys, these were some of the musculoskeletal ones. These were like jiu-jitsu athletes, because I do have a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So, people, some fighters know, oh, he has a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He probably understands us. So a lot of the fighters were coming to me. And I've taken care of some of the most famous mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu fighters in the world. With that said, some of these guys who came from Malaysia were not wealthy. So it was very hard for them. At the time I was in California, it was very hard for them to come from Malaysia to California and pay everything that went along with that. So these guys were having having t-shirt sales and bake sales. These guys were raising money. And quite frankly, it was gratifying to help them. Some of these jiu-jitsu guys were told by the chiropractors, there are chiropractors there, chiropractors and medical doctors in Malaysia, if you keep doing jiu-jitsu, you'll end up in a wheelchair. They were told that. They came to me, I fixed them up, they went back and they're winning fights. So the point I'm getting at is, I said, man, these people are raising money to come see me from Malaysia. I should just teach all the doctors and healers, chiropractors, any kind of doctor or healer, how to do what I do. Then they don't have to fly from Malaysia and raise money to see me. So that was kind of what got me pushed to do it. And then in 2017, I opened Zone School, which is an online program. It's online, you learn online, and it's open to any doctor or healer. It could be a chiropractor, it could be acupuncturist, a naturopath, an MD, it could be a Reiki master, an energy worker, a spiritual healer. Anyone who is a doctor or healer of some type is eligible to join. The basic course itself is about 60 hours of me teaching. So you enroll, you get immediate and lifetime access to about 60 hours of me teaching. And 8 of those hours are live Q&As with me within a group. So as you're going through the material, you can ask me questions. And then we have many different advanced programs, different tiers of advanced. And our most advanced programs, like our triple advanced programs, there's about 500 hours of me teaching for them. So we've created an army around the world of great healers. And I'll just give one example. It just popped in my head recently, and it popped in my head now as I'm talking. I have, just to show how powerful this healing information is, I just want to make this point, Julianne. Some people, and I'm not saying it's not a valid point, this would be outside of Zone School knowledge, outside of Zone School knowledge, just in general. Someone might think, well, acupuncturist is more equipped to help someone heal than, let's say, a massage therapist, right? If they have, digestive problem or a circulatory problem, or, a medical doctor may be more equipped to help someone heal than a Reiki master if they have immune system problem or whatever. Again, I'm not even saying that stuff is true. I'm just saying like there's a hierarchy or a perceived or presumed hierarchy in like degrees of, healing professions. Okay. So here's my point. And by the way, there may be, I don't know.
You just know what you do works.
Exactly. And here's the point about that. I have a guy he happens to be in Australia. His name is Ray. He's in Australia. He is a massage therapist. Like his degree is in massage therapy. That's what before he came across Zone School, he was a massage therapist. He's joined Zone School. He's in what's called our mastermind, which is like our triple advanced. Someone came to him on a heart transplant list. They were on a heart transplant list. Now you can imagine how messed up someone's heart is if the cardiologist is saying, there's nothing we can do. Yeah. Your heart needs to be replaced. Well, guess what? They went to Ray. He did what he did, what I taught him. He did what he did under the guise of, like I said, he's a massage therapist, but it doesn't matter because he's in Zone School and Mastermind, and they are off the heart transplant list. Their heart is totally healthy, totally healed, done, confirmed by the cardiologist. So as I've said before, a massage therapist in Zone School can do more and get better results than any chiropractor living who's not in Zone School. So once you're in Zone School, all bets are off. It doesn't matter what your profession is in healing, you'll get results that no one else can get.
I love that. I actually know a friend of mine who, same idea. She needed a new heart. She was told she would be dying and she's totally fine now. So, I mean, I'm speaking to support you and what you're saying, that this is real. This does happen. Like, it's not a death sentence. Just because your doctor says that does not mean it's still an opinion. It's still a best guess. But it's a guess. So, on that note, we do need to go to a commercial break. We'll be back in just a second. When we come back, we're going to talk with Dr. Pete about how there is a difference between, the back crackers, which is what most people think of when they think of chiropractic practices, and what he does. So we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name is Julianne Meyer. You're watching Own Your Wellness, and today's guest is Dr. Pete Goldman. And before we bring him back on, I just want to say I love what he does. He speaks my language. I also grew up in a household where I went to a chiropractor at like 3 years old. Organic food, the whole thing, you name it. My mom was way ahead of her time. And the thing I like to think about with the spine is it being like an information superhighway. And I'm curious what Dr. Pete has to say about that. Welcome back. So before we went to commercial break, we were talking about how, the hierarchy of supposedly of healers and how we expect certain healers to do certain things and stay in these certain little boxes. And I know that there's a lot of people in your profession that kind of give you a bad name versus what you actually do, which is heal. I mean, there's one thing to crack somebody's back and neck, and it's quite another thing to really genuinely help them lead quality life. What is it that you teach that makes it so different from what you learned in school?
Well, there's a few things. Let me start by saying, let's just say that there's, we're talking about chiropractic specifically now. So let's just say there's a certain chiropractor who believes A, B, C, whatever that might be, based on a technique they do or a philosophy of healing they have. Let's say there's a different chiropractor who believes, X, Y, Z, based on technique or techniques they do or philosophy they have. Or let's say, some chiropractors believe that chiropractic is for certain things and some believe it's for others. And here's the great part. The bottom line is results. Results beat everything. Results trump everything. So because of that, anyone can say whatever they want, but results are results. For example, let's just say there were, 10 different techniques I think there's actually 300 different techniques of chiropractic, but let's say there were 10 different chiropractors right here, like present on this call with us. And let's say each one did a different technique and they were good at their technique. And they also were convinced that their technique was the best. And they explain, let's say, for example, one chiropractor thinks the upper cervical technique is the best. And there's different techniques within upper cervical. But with that said, a general upper cervical practitioner is very concerned with the first two bones, which is called C1 and C2, or the atlas and axis. And they're convinced that with the atlas and axis in place, the brainstem has no interference, and because of that, the body can heal from whatever. So that's a theory or philosophy. There might be a practitioner in what's called chiropractic biophysics, and they're very interested in making everyone's spine almost look like a textbook. So, like if you look at a textbook, like if you look at, let's say, the neck from the side, there's like a natural lordotic curve, and there's like a natural kyphotic curve in the upper back, et cetera, et cetera. And if those curves are pronounced or diminished, they want to kind of push them to be what they call normal. So that's another philosophy or theory. And let's say there's another one called motion palpation, and a motion doctor, they believe that as long as there's proper motion in the spine, then the body is healthy. So if they feel fixations in the spine, they'll adjust into those fixations to bring motion back to that area. So, and by the way, I only mentioned 3 of my imaginary 10 that are here, but there's 300. So let's just say these 3 doctors in this example are kind of arguing like, well, I think this is the most important because of the upper cervicals, and I think this is the most important because of the structure, and I think this is the most important because of the motion. My only thing to them is I say, okay, this person right here has IBS. They have terrible digestion. Which one of you is going to fix it? If they go to you for 2 months, they can go to you twice a week for 2 months. That's enough. Is their digestion fixed? Or this person over here has a serious immune system problem. You've already said the importance of, your upper cervical or that. Good. Let me see. Are you going to fix it? So what's, like I said, these
Honey, where your mouth is.
These philosophies and theories are a dime a dozen, but I want to see who can deliver. So what's beautiful, to answer your question about the difference of the zone technique, is the results. Because I could come on here and explain all the intricacies of zone technique, which, anyone could just go to the Zone School website and learn that fairly quickly. in summary form. But, next week they can watch some other show and there's some other, doctor or healer or chiropractor explaining why their technique is the best. And the thing is, Julianne, some people are very eloquent, they're well-spoken, they have a lot of personal magnetism, and they can convince people of a lot of things. But again, results are results. So if, for example, if a woman has endometriosis, how many chiropractors can fix that? None. But guess what? My students can all fix it. So now, don't get me wrong. I mean, if there's a chiropractor who practices long enough, they practice for 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to get their, hit or miss here and there. Like, man, a patient came in, for neck pain, and I just adjusted them for 2 months and their endometriosis healed. I mean, it could happen here or there. But if you know how to do what I teach, then wrapping that up would be as easy as wrapping up a stiff neck. So that's the answer. The difference is results, healing results, and they're not even close.
And I like that because it's kind of like just you can talk and talk and talk, but are you actually making the difference? And nobody's really interested in how you do it as long as you do it.
Well put, exactly.
Can you heal me or not? Okay, if you tell me I have to do this, and if I do these things, then I'm healed. All right.
As I've said many times, Julianne, the person with migraine headaches every day, they don't want migraine headaches anymore. The person with heartburn every day, they want perfect digestion. The person with panic attacks doesn't want panic attacks. The person with anxiety wants to feel relaxed. The person with insomnia wants to sleep easily. So if you can deliver that, hey, good job. And if you can't, then who cares?
And I like that because, it doesn't really matter. I mean, even as a coach myself, people are interested in how I do my method. They just want the results. They want the pain to go away. They want this to happen. That's what they want. They don't really care how it happens. It's like, I don't need to know how electricity works in order to use my light switch.
Excellent analogy, by the way. And by the way, if you eat an apple or if I eat an apple, eventually the body will turn that apple into like a fingernail. I don't really know how that works, but like, I know that I should eat. Yeah. So exactly, every little mechanism does not have to be understood by the patient. And quite frankly, even the healer or doctor doesn't understand every little mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. And I would personally, myself, rather work with a healer who is okay with not understanding everything, but willing to help me as best they can. Because that just comes naturally, whether they're really cognizant of it or not. It's kind of like, same thing. I don't necessarily need to know why. I just need to know it works.
Well, on that note, outside, listen, I've said this before, God forbid someone's like swimming and like a shark bites their arm off, but let's say they survive and they have no arm. If that person comes to me, I'm not going to tell them, oh yeah, come to me for a while and, I'm going to balance your body and your arm will grow back. I'm not going to say that to them. Or, if someone has a burst appendix, I'm going to be like, call 911 because I don't know how to do emergency medicine. Yeah. Or if someone needs stitches, I would be like, whoa, call 911, go get stitches. I don't know how to give stitches. But outside of, the arm bit off or those emergency medicine scenarios, I am totally confident in helping anyone with basically anything. And I've delivered it since the mid-90s. And that's why people didn't fly from 30 different countries and cities for nothing. I never advertised. It was all word of mouth.
Well, I like too that you're multiplying yourself in order for other people to help people. So that's creating the impact that, in order to make an impact in the world on a grander scale, be able to do that. You have to be able to multiply yourself. So I really like that. I think that is such a, instead of like, I'm going to die with my secrets inside of me.
And actually, it's funny. I wasn't even going to mention this, but since you said that, you see, this is a good interview. You're extracting all these things that I, A, wasn't going to say, and B, I kind of forgot. I remember, I told you that was 2017, right? Mm-hmm. I remember like 2014-ish, when people were coming from far and wide. I was thinking like, man, I may be getting better results than anyone living, but in 100 years, no one's going to know about it. I thought that. I remember thinking that. I'm like, no one's going to even know about it. It's not like I'm going to go down in history. No one's going to remember this stuff or even know about it. But Zone School gives that opportunity for it to spread exponentially, which is a great feeling. Great feeling.
So I have a question for you too. You were talking about like healing the heart and things like that. What about things like Parkinson's?
Actually, good question. So first of all, I've had great results with Parkinson's. I have not had a lot of them come. It's not like I can't say, oh, Julianne, I've had 300 Parkinson's cases coming. I have not.
Yeah.
But I've had like 6 with pretty spectacular results. And let me tell you how I look at things like I could say Parkinson's, but I'm just going to give you a general theme I have, which could apply to Parkinson's, but I'll just use a different example. Let's say someone came to me and said they had fibromyalgia. They tell me they have fibromyalgia. That first visit, hey, Dr. Pete, nice to meet you. They have fibromyalgia. They want me to help them. Mm-hmm. The first thing I say to them, I go, let me ask you a question. You went to the doctor, presumably for something. Like you went there because you had some problem, and then they examined you and they determined that you have fibromyalgia. Am I correct? They go, yes. I go, well, what did you tell them? Like when you went there, what did you say to them? And they said, oh, they told the doctor they have muscle pain. I go, well, myalgia, the word myalgia, myo, myo in Latin means muscle. Mm-hmm. And algia, algia in Latin means pain. So you told them in English you have muscle pain, and then they told you back in Latin you have muscle pain. Who cares? Like, yeah, good point. Who cares? I say, that's number one. I say, furthermore, let me ask you a question. Wouldn't you agree that people have had muscle pain for thousands of years? Would you agree? They go, yeah, I would say so. I say, so what, did they name it fibromyalgia like 30 years ago? They just named it. Who cares? They just named it 30 years ago. But people have had muscle pain for thousands of years. So the fact that they named it 30 years ago is also meaningless. They go, yeah, it is meaningless. So I say, look, here's the bottom line. You had muscle pain because your body was unbalanced. What unbalanced it? I don't know. But nonetheless, it got unbalanced because you're coming here with muscle pain. I'm going to find out where your body was not balanced, and I'm going to balance it. And when your body's balanced, you're not going to have muscle pain. And guess what? You're not going to have fibromyalgia because you can't have a totally healthy, balanced body with healthy muscles that work great and feel great and also have fibromyalgia. They can't coexist. And then they come for, a few weeks or a month or two, and guess what? They have no more fibromyalgia because they have totally healthy muscles head to toe. So that's how I handle pretty much any condition.
And I really like that because I think too, like how many times have people been misdiagnosed and all this? It's like, it's still a best guess. You're still telling a doctor something. They're still looking at certain things. Like one of my best friends, she was diagnosed with MS. She doesn't have it. It was from COVID. She had long COVID. That's really what it was. And she's fine now. She had brain lesions. They're gone. All these things that supposedly were MS, and she was going to die from all this. And she's fine.
Well, here's one for you. Here's one for you. Speaking of Latin, not that I'm a Latin expert, but the word diagnosis, I agree with you totally, by the way. The word diagnosis, D-I, in Latin means two. And agnosis, agnost in Latin means to not know. So diagnosis translates from Latin to English as two who don't know.
Oh, that's crazy. I'm so glad you taught me that because.
And by the way, let me add this to it. C. Everett Koop, who is the Surgeon General of the United States. So, the Surgeon General is like the top MD. He's like the head MD. He or she is the head MD. Mm-hmm. Well, C. Everett Koop, who was the head MD, I think it was in the 1990s, he said, this is an MD, he said that 70% of medical diagnoses in America are in error. He said that. So here's the head MD of the United States saying that when you go to a medical doctor and they tell you something, there's a 70% chance that what they told you is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, by the way, I think it was in the 1950s. There was a doctor. His name was Richard Cabot, or it's spelled like Shabbat, but I think it's pronounced Cabot. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. But he was a medical doctor at Johns Hopkins Medical School. Like they had like all the best equipment and whatever. And he did this study where he would do post-mortem studies of people who had passed away from diseases, and he would check in the post-mortems against the diagnosis they had. They were 52% in error. Wow. At the best medical, that's Johns Hopkins. That's like the best equipment, the best doctors. The diagnoses were 52% wrong. Richard Cabot or I think I'm pronouncing it right.
So crazy. I love that. We do need to go to one more commercial break, so we're going to be back in just a moment. For those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. We will be right back. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you are not your diagnosis and how maybe you can look at these things differently in order to help yourself in a much healthier, happier way. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Julianne Meyer. You're watching Own Your Wellness. We're going to bring Dr. Pete back on. Welcome back. So something I was thinking about during the commercial break was this idea, because, we were talking about diagnosis before and how it's a guess. But one of the things that horrifies me that most people aren't aware of with Western medicine, especially in the United States. I've had the privilege of living in other countries where the medical systems are completely different. And so the way that people's health care is looked at is completely different. But like you take cancer patients and oncologists, a lot of them are making a lot of their money from the cancer chemo drugs that they are using and selling for their patients. I'm not saying that they don't think it'll help. I'm just saying that there's also a financial incentive as well. So if there's one thing that you could impart as far as looking at our own healthcare differently, what would that be?
Well, I'll just address, first of all, the diagnosis thing, in addition to what I said before, by saying the following, which is this. Let's just say a patient came to me and they said they had IBS. They have very bad digestion. They have a diagnosis of IBS. What I would say to them, I go, you may. However, let's face it, you have symptom ABCD, which has been called IBS. I'm telling you, you have symptom ABCD because your body was unbalanced. I'm going to find out where it was unbalanced and balance it, and then you will have, I expect you to have perfect digestion. When you have perfect digestion, you obviously won't have symptoms ABCD, and obviously you only were given the name the condition you supposedly had was given the name IBS because you had these symptoms. But guess what? You're not going to have them anymore. And when your body is expressing perfect digestion, you obviously won't have IBS. That's the first thing. I don't so much fight them on. I say what I said before about diagnosis, but then I don't fight them on that, because if they say, "Oh, I definitely have IBS," I say, "You may have it." But guess what? When I balance your body perfectly, you obviously won't have it because you'll have perfect digestion. So that's number one. Number two, what medical doctors have to understand is they might inadvertently have a certain rapport with a patient, and that patient's subconscious is wide open. It's almost like waking hypnosis. And when they're told, like, you have this condition, whatever, that those words can kill the patient if those words are not the proper words. So, there's this thing, I read this actually, you'll like this, Julianne. I read this in a British medical journal. I think it's called Lancet. I think that's the name. But anyway, maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. But listen to this. This is a real story. In England, there was a prisoner on death row. I don't know what he had done, but he was on death row in the year around 1900. And they were going to kill him. They were going to execute him because that's what they were going to do. Mm-hmm. However, some of the doctors in England at the time were kind of understanding like mesmerism and hypnosis and the subconscious, they didn't really understand it, but they kind of did. So they were doing some experiments with the subconscious. So considering they were going to kill this guy, they figured, we'll just experiment on him while we're killing him. This is a real story. So what they did was they told him they were going to cut a little slit in the back of his neck, and he was going to bleed to death down his back. That's what they told him. Now, they blindfolded him. They did cut the slit. Mm-hmm. However, they sealed it right away, so he did not lose any blood, or he lost one drop of blood. However, they dripped over the cut down his back water. So he had the sensation of bleeding to death. Mm-hmm. Number one, he died in 6 minutes, dead.
Jeez.
And number two, because they had doctors observing this experiment, his body displayed every symptom in those 6 minutes in increments of someone bleeding to death. So if the subconscious latches onto an idea, it will reflect in the body. And if there's a rapport between doctor and patient, and the doctor says you have this horrible thing, and that goes in the subconscious, it'll manifest in the subconscious most likely, just like that idea that I just gave you with that experiment. So what I would tell MDs is to wake up and be real careful what comes out of your mouth, because what comes out of your mouth is doing more harm most of the time than the so-called condition the patient has.
Exactly. Oh my goodness, that speaks to me 100%. It really is true. It's like what we focus on expands. I mean, first of all, laws of the universe, but also it's just when you think it's true, it's like we make it true. It's our brain does that. I can't even tell you how many times I've done that to myself, both good and bad things, but it really does make a difference how people speak to us.
And on that note, when just a little historical thing, when Alexander the Great was invading Persia, Iran, or Persia, which was called at the time, had many, many more troops than the Greeks had. Mm-hmm. Alexander the Great was, well, I guess they didn't call him the Great yet. Alexander was leading a very small army into a huge army. But here's the thing. The Persians, they believed in gods, plural, gods, but they kind of said we're going to ask the gods for help, but the gods might not help us. And, they were looking patterns in the astronomy to, and they even looked at the way the insects moved. If the ants were moving in a different way, it told them things. But the Persians didn't have that much faith that they had a power behind them. They were just kind of trying to interpret things to interact with it the best they can. Mm-hmm. But Alexander's mother said to him, hey, who your father is, right? And he's like, oh, King Philip, and she's like, no, it's Zeus. And they believed that stuff back then in Greece. They believed you could be like a demigod. So Alexander's like, yeah, I'm a demigod. My father's Zeus. He's a god. So, of course, he had this image, this thing in his subconscious, I'm a god. Of course I'm going to do this. And guess what? He did it. So when you have that vibration of that power emanating from you based on that idea, it can do amazing things, whether it's healing you or, if you want to be Alexander, you can take over half the world.
I like that. I really like that. It's true. I know of a couple people that one of the ways they help cure themselves from cancer is watching comedy, because all they did was laugh. They were laughing and happy and bringing those, that joy into their lives. And they became cancer free.
I'll tell you, I know we're wrapping up here. I'll tell you a crazy story. It's a true story. And everyone can take it how they want. I'm sure, Julianne, you'll like it and understand it. Everyone else, just take it how you want. This is a true story. My father had many stores in Manhattan when I was a kid. He was a very successful businessman. And he opened a particular store, but he didn't have a lot of time to be there. So he just he knew a guy in Manhattan that he said, okay, we'll kind of be partners in this one store and you'll basically run it, but I'll finance it. So they had a good relationship. This guy was a real street guy, kind of like a pseudo mafia guy in New York. So anyway, that guy, the tough dude, his wife got really sick and she went to the hospital. And then they examined her, and the guy, my father's partner at the time, one of his many business partners, who was like that kind of tough street guy in New York, he went to the doctor, and he said, what's up with his wife? And the doctor told him, your wife is not going to be alive for long. Like, this is her condition and whatever. Now, by the way, this guy was just a street. He didn't understand any of this stuff, but he was just like a tough guy. So this is a real story. He took the doctor by his here. He pushed him up against the wall. He said, listen to me. Don't tell my wife an effing thing. Don't say a word to her. And the doctor, of course, was terrified. So he walked in the room. His wife said, what happened? He said, no, everything's fine, honey. You're fine. They checked out. You're totally healthy head to toe. Let's go home. And she lived. She was fine. My dad told me that story 25 years after. She was still around.
Wow.
That guy, by the way, the guy was dead, but I don't know what happened to him, but he was alive. So take that for what it's worth.
No, I really like that too. It's like either we're preparing to die or preparing to live. So which one are you going to choose? Are you?
You have to have a good friend in the mafia. You're all set.
Exactly.
Let them talk to your doctors for you.
Well, we have about 2 minutes left. So I'm just curious, are there any final thoughts or anything that you'd love to share with the audience?
First of all, thank you, Julianne. It's a very fun hour. Number one, it's my first thought. And my second thought is any doctor or any healer, chiropractor, acupuncturist, naturopath, medical doctor, Reiki master, spiritual healer, massage therapist, physical therapist who wants to learn what I'm teaching, just simply go, like it says on the screen there, to zoneschoolofhealing.com. You can join right on the homepage. You get immediate and lifetime access to 60 hours of me teaching you, and you will be a healing master. And I'll tell you this in closing, I've had many, like too many to count, chiropractors, for example, say to me, hey, Dr. Pete, I've been practicing for 35 years. Not like they're new. 35 years of practice. They go, I've been in zone school for 1 year. I now do things I never could have done, never, ever, ever could have done, and help people with conditions I never could have helped them with. And and they tell me it's the best decision of their healing career. So if you want to learn from me, go to the website, join, and you will.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad that we got to have you on today, because not only are you teaching people how to do what you do, but you're also letting people know that there is hope. Western medicine doesn't have all the answers, and most of the time they're wrong. I mean, like you said, unless you got a bone sticking out of you, your appendix burst, something, that needs immediate attention. I understand that. We both understand that. But I just love that there are ways to heal yourself that are maybe not commonly known. So I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. I truly appreciate you being here. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to the next time that we get to have a conversation, because what you're doing is absolutely amazing.
I will come on anytime you want me on. I'll be here. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. That is all the time that we have. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back again next Thursday. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week.